Dad kicked me out on Christmas night, so I ruined their lives.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Mom, I'm home. David shouted excitedly. I bought gifts for everyone. Guess what I got you? Ellen didn't turn around. Her hand paused for just a second before continuing to stir the chicken, as if she hadn't heard him. David froze for a moment but kept the smile on his face. He walked toward Michael and held out a small box tied with a blue ribbon. I know you like mechanical watches, so I saved up from my part-time jobs these past weeks to buy this. It's not expensive, but... Michael interrupted, you're not part of this family anymore. Why would you be giving gifts? David stood there, stunned. The smile vanished from his face. He looked at Michael, confused. Michael, what are you saying? David asked, his voice softening. Michael stood up and set his wine glass down firmly on the table. He walked slowly toward David, his voice as cold as the snow outside. I already talked to your mom. You're 17, you should be contributing financially to this house. I've supported you long enough. It's time you take responsibility for your own life. David took a step back, shaking his head. But... I'm still in school. I've been working part-time, and I've already helped with some small expenses. Michael let out a mocking laugh. You think those few measly bucks matter? Who pays for the electricity? The water? The food? Me. I'm not your father, David. I'm not responsible for raising a lazy, useless stepson like you. Useless? David's voice cracked. I get up at 5 every morning to deliver newspapers. In the evenings, I work at the sandwich shop. I still go to school, turn in all my assignments on time. I do all of that so Mom doesn't have to worry more. Ellen remained still. David turned to her, his eyes brimming with tears. Mom. Say something. You know how hard I've tried. Why are you silent? She finally turned around. The coldness in her eyes hurt more than the freezing weather outside. I don't want to argue on Christmas Eve. If you can't manage to live here anymore, then leave. Michael has supported you for over 6 years already. So, that's all I am to you. David's voice trembled. A burden? A nuisance? I'm your son. My son died when your father did, Ellen said, each word like a knife to his chest. Now I just want peace. Michael smirked. Well? Are you gonna pack or what? David stood frozen, his heart aching. It felt like the floor had collapsed beneath him, pulling him into a bottomless pit. He looked over at the dining table, set for 3, now clearly meant for just 2. The gift he had brought still lay unopened, ribbon intact. I don't have anywhere to go, David whispered. Not my problem, Michael said flatly. Ellen stepped aside, avoiding her son's eyes. David bit his lip, trying not to cry. He turned away and walked to his small bedroom. A few minutes later, he came out carrying a backpack with a few old clothes, a worn scarf, and the gift box he never got to give. He stood at the doorway, looking back one last time. Merry Christmas. No one answered. David closed the door behind him. Snow was still falling heavily, covering sidewalks, rooftops, and the shattered heart of a boy just rejected by his own mother. He trudged toward the nearby park. The cold wind slashed his face, snow stuck to his eyelashes. Couples held hands, families gathered to take pictures near the big Christmas tree. David sat on a frozen stone bench and placed his backpack beside him. He opened the gift he had meant for his mom, a hand-knit lavender scarf. I started knitting this back in October, David murmured, burying his face into the scarf. I guess she doesn't need it anymore. A small boy appeared, holding his young father's hand as they walked out of a nearby church. Daddy, why is that boy sitting alone? Doesn't he have a home? The man glanced at David, then looked away. Don't get involved, Andrew. David heard every word but didn't react. He just pulled his backpack closer and wrapped himself tighter in the scarf. The night grew colder, and fewer people remained on the streets. The snow thickened, blanketing his black hair, his shoulders, and the now-soaked gift box. Laughter echoed in the distance. Two young adults were playing in the snow with hot coffee in their hands. One of them, a girl with curly auburn hair, turned to David. "Hey, you okay over there?" she called out. David looked up, eyes red. He nodded, though his body was shivering. "Oh my God, do you need help or something?" "I'm Paula, and this is Rick," she said, stepping closer, concern in her eyes. Louis hesitated. "Paula, it's late. Don't get involved with weirdos. New York's full of homeless scammers." David just looked down, clutching the scarf. Paula stood still for a second, then followed Louis. David heard her voice trail off, "I just wanted to do something good on Christmas." Silence returned. David stayed there until the church bell struck midnight. Christmas had arrived, but to him, it was just the beginning of an endless winter. From that Christmas Eve on, David became a wandering shadow in the heart of New York. He left the park as the festive lights dimmed, leaving only cold trees and footprints in the melting snow. His worn sneakers barely kept the cold water from seeping into his feet. David walked aimlessly, with no goal and no direction, until he reached a small station Grand Central where the homeless often gathered at night to escape the cold. "This place is full, kid," a voice called out. It was a man in his 50s, hair gray, wrapped in a worn-out trench coat. "I just need a small corner." "I won't bother anyone," David said quietly. The man looked at him for a moment, then shrugged. "Name's Raymond. You can sit next to me, just don't try to take my blanket." David sat down on the cold tile floor, back against a pillar, hugging his backpack tightly. Raymond shared a bit of stale bread from his pocket. They chewed in silence. "What brings you out here? Ran away from home?" "No. I got kicked out," David replied, eyes empty. Raymond chuckled, though not joyfully. "Same happened to me. My wife left and took our daughter after I lost my job. Everything went downhill from there." David said nothing, just stared at his hands, where red spots from the cold had started to appear. All night, he dozed off to the sounds of train whistles, coughing, and the snores of scattered lives. The next morning, before sunrise, he was woken by shouting. "Get up! You're not allowed to sleep here." Two police officers appeared, slamming their batons on the floor. Raymond grabbed David's arm. "Let's go. Before they drag you to the station." The homeless slowly got up, gathering torn blankets, plastic bags, and whatever little they had. David and Raymond walked off toward Central Park. It was still dark, snow blanketing the paths. "Got anyone you can stay with?" Raymond asked. David shook his head. No one left. They rested under the awning of a bookstore. After a while, Raymond handed David a handwritten address. "There's a place that gives out free porridge around noon. It's on Brooklyn Avenue. But you gotta go early or they'll run out." David thanked him and left. His stomach was growling constantly. He rummaged through his backpack, only some damp, mushy cookies remained. He ate tiny pieces slowly, trying to chew as long as he could. That whole day, David walked street after street. He stopped by every store, every small restaurant, asking for any job: dishwashing, table cleaning, but whenever people saw his ragged appearance, they shook their heads. "We don't hire minors. We've got enough staff, move along." "Sorry, I don't want any trouble." David didn't give up. He walked all the way to Brooklyn Heights, then looped through Bushwick. When he finally reached the porridge place Raymond had told him about, the line stretched down the entire block. David queued in the biting cold, his nose red, limbs shaking. After over an hour, he finally received a bowl of watery porridge and a small piece of bread. A blonde woman wearing a cross around her neck bent down to look at him. Son, what's your name? David. How old are you? 17. She went quiet for a moment, then spoke gently, I'm Teresa. If you have nowhere to sleep, you can stop by St. Mary's Church tonight. There's a small room for young people. David's eyes lit up as he thanked her. But that hope was soon crushed when, later that evening, Teresa met him at the church door and shook her head apologetically. I'm so sorry. A group of addicts came in earlier. I can't let you stay, it's too dangerous. David nodded silently. He understood. He returned to the park and sat beneath the awning of a closed cafe. The sky began dropping sleet. He had no blanket, no mattress, only the lavender scarf he had once knit for his mother. A group of teens, 3 boys and a girl, walked by, laughing loudly. One of them stopped and looked at David. Hey guys, check it out, someone's living like a sewer rat. He walked closer and kicked David's backpack. Whatcha hiding in here? Got money? David jumped up and held onto his bag. Don't, please. Smack. A punch landed square on his cheek. David fell to the wet concrete. Stop hitting him, Ethan, the girl in the group yelled. I'm just messing around, Madison. Look at his face, like a starving puppy. They walked off, having stolen the lavender scarf, the only thing David had left from his old family. He lay curled up, blood dripping from his mouth, eyes filled with tears but too exhausted to cry. The next morning, David dragged himself up, body aching. He stopped by a pharmacy, asking for a bandage, but was waved off. We're not a free clinic, a worker snapped. David entered the supermarket and, finding a secluded corner, tried to sneak an old loaf of bread, but the security guard caught him. Put it back and get the hell out of here. David threw the loaf to the ground and bolted out the door, as if fleeing from the entire world. It was raining again. Heavy snowflakes fell on his hair, his coat. He slumped down on a step, facing a lit window. Inside, a family was having dinner. The mother ladled soup, and the child held the father's hand, giggling. David turned his face away, eyes stinging. Ellen's words echoed in his mind, my son died when your father did. He buried his head in his knees, shivering. David? He looked up. It was Raymond, the man from the train station the other night. He held out a sandwich still wrapped in wax paper. I saw you wandering around all day. Here, take this. David took the sandwich, hands trembling. Thank you. Do you have a place to sleep? David shook his head. Raymond thought for a moment. There's an abandoned parking garage near the old station. Not exactly safe, but at least it's dry. David followed him. They arrived at a rundown lot with a rusted iron gate. Inside, it was pitch black and smelled of damp and mold. A few cardboard boxes served as makeshift beds, with old scraps of blankets piled in a corner. Not exactly luxurious, Raymond said with a weary smile. But better than freezing outside. David lay down and hugged his backpack tightly to his chest. Raymond settled down farther away and was soon snoring softly. David couldn't sleep at all. The old house, the Christmas dinner, his mother's eyes, they played over and over in his mind, like a blurred dream soaked in sorrow. Then he wondered, am I not worthy of love? Or is it just because I'm a stepson, and this is the fate I was born into? The only answer was the sound of wind howling through the rusted metal gaps above, cold as the fate pressing down on his shoulders. 3 weeks later, New York remained bitterly cold. David got up early, folding the damp cardboard and carefully tucking it back in the corner. Raymond was still asleep, his breathing heavy from a lingering cold. David pulled the blanket over him, then quietly stepped outside. He had heard a small restaurant on Lexington Avenue was looking for a kitchen helper. The Taste Garden was barely 30 square meters in size, with 4 small wooden tables and a closed kitchen in the back. The owner, Rose, was a stern-looking older woman with precise, no-nonsense movements. "Know how to chop onions?" she asked when David came asking for work. "Yes, ma'am. I can slice carrots, wash dishes, clean the kitchen. I can do anything." "Got any papers?" David lowered his head. "I don't have an ID. But I really want to work. I won't cause any trouble." Rose stared at him for a long while, then sighed. "1 week trial. Do well and you stay. Payment at the end of the week, cash under the table, no records." "Yes. Thank you." David bowed, his eyes lighting up for the first time in days. From then on, he worked relentlessly. From 9 a.m. until after 10 p.m., David barely took a break, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, scrubbing the stove, emptying trash bins. Even as his hands got scratched and the cold made his fingers numb, he never complained. Rose noticed. One evening at the end of the week, while checking the books, Rose called him into the storage room. "Come here. Help me go through some old supply invoices." David opened file folders, sorting them by date. His fingers skimmed over numbers, notes, and stamps with speed and familiarity. "You're good at bookkeeping," Rose remarked, half joking. "Why not get an office job?" David gave a faint smile. "I used to help my biological father manage the books for his small company. But, he passed away." He flipped to another folder and suddenly stopped. His eyes narrowed in concentration. On a thin yellowed sheet of paper, a faded printed line read: "Joint property ownership, Ellen V. Walker and Charles J. Morgan, registered, May 23, 2005. That name. Charles J. Morgan, David's biological father. He quickly flipped through the papers. Below were a series of other documents: a power of attorney, a purchase contract for an apartment on Maple Street, a Citibank savings account ledger, all under his parents' names, with no mention of Michael. David tried to stay calm. "Ms. Rose, these papers." "Oh, they belong to the previous tenants. An old couple who moved out years ago. Left behind a pile of files. I use them for packing boxes. Could I keep a few of these? I think someone in my family might be connected." Rose frowned, but then nodded. "Just don't go digging through everything." That night, David returned to the parking garage where Raymond was. Using a small pen flashlight, he examined each document again. The more he read, the more he trembled. All the assets from the apartment they used to live in, the old car, to the savings account left behind by his father were jointly owned by Ellen. There were no transfer records to Michael. There was even a prenuptial agreement copy. Ellen retained full control over all premarital assets. Michael had no right to claim anything in case of divorce. Why didn't Mom ever tell me this?" David murmured. "She let him call me a burden, ungrateful, while she held everything." "What's that?" Raymond's voice called from the corner. David startled and stuffed the papers away. "Nothing. Just thinking. If you need help, say something. I worked as an office clerk for 3 years before things went bad." Raymond sat up. "Don't bottle it up." David looked at him, hesitant. Then he took out a few sheets. "I think my mom and stepfather have been hiding something huge from me." Raymond took them and read carefully. This is a legal property registration. And this prenuptial agreement clearly states Michael has no claim at all. If that's the case," he looked directly at David. "You've been lied to." David clenched his fists. "They threw me out, saying I didn't contribute, that I was freeloading. But everything they have came from my real dad. You could sue, if you have enough proof." "No. I don't want to sue. At least, not yet," David said, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. "I just need them to know I'm not stupid. I'll gather everything. One day, the truth will come to light." Raymond nodded. I'll help you. Not out of pity, because I hate people who repay kindness with cruelty. In the days that followed, David kept working at Rose's restaurant, and whenever he could, he visited the city library to use the public computers. He researched property law, inheritance rights, legal disputes. He even got help from a librarian, a young woman named Camille, who showed him how to search the digital archives. You writing a law thesis or something? Camille asked. No. I just want to know what rights I have when someone tries to take away my dignity. She nodded, not asking more. But from that day on, every time David came in, she saved him a computer spot and a small cup of hot cocoa. Bit by bit, David collected everything: copies of documents his mother used to hold, bank details, real estate ownership records. Every printout went into a secret folder in his backpack, now more precious than food or blankets. One afternoon, while David was cleaning up the counter at the restaurant, Rose approached with a small envelope. Someone left this for you. Said their name was Sean. I didn't see their face, but they said they know you. David opened the letter. Inside was a hastily written note. David, Michael is starting to sell off assets. He's burning through everything. Watch out. David's chest tightened. Sean, a distant cousin from his father's side, was the only one who had supported him at the funeral years ago. He clenched the note in his hand. I won't let him destroy everything. Not again. Transfer it now, Stephen. I'm not waiting any longer. Michael barked into the phone, pacing across a large living room with newly polished wood floors. Italian sofas, crystal chandeliers, and a brand new sound system still carried the scent of fresh plastic. But his face was taut like a stretched wire. Ellen! Michael shouted. Where's that damn elevator repair invoice? Those idiots are asking you to pay it. Ellen rushed out of the kitchen, flowers still on her hands. I put it in the wooden cabinet, next to the microwave. It's not there. You're always so disorganized. Michael, stop yelling. Today's our anniversary. Anniversary, he sneered. We're about to lose this house. Ellen froze. What are you talking about? Michael slammed a stack of papers onto the table. Our accounts are frozen. The bank discovered a pile of debt. Compound interest is piling up. My lawyer warned me, if we don't come up with at least 50 grand in the next 30 days, the house will be reappraised for foreclosure. Ellen staggered, collapsing into a chair. But, how did it come to this? You said investing in real estate would pay off. The market crashed. I didn't see it coming. And you've been spending like a damn queen. Ellen stared in shock. I only bought a few new curtains, renovated the kitchen, replaced the bathroom mirror. What about the BMW? The Rolex? The trip to Miami? Who paid for those? Michael went silent. But instead of admitting guilt, he screamed, don't turn this around on me. If you hadn't tied all the assets to that useless brat David, I could have mortgaged it by now. Ellen turned pale. What did you say? Michael gave a twisted laugh. I found out. The Maple Street apartment, the old savings account, they're still under your name and your ex-husband's. You never transferred them to me. I've been living in the house of a dead man and his son. Ellen stammered. I forgot. Back then the lawyer said to leave the documents as is. I didn't think it would. Then take responsibility now. Michael roared, face flushing red. Sell that apartment. Use the money to pay the debt. Ellen backed away, tears falling. Are you crazy? That's the last thing I have to remember Charles by. I can't. Then we go down together. Michael smashed a wine glass against the wall. Meanwhile, David continued working quietly at the Taste Garden. He didn't tell anyone what he discovered. He just kept watching, listening, taking notes. One day, Camille the young librarian came to the restaurant, carrying a folder. Someone transferred the Maple Street apartment title to an old bank account, she whispered. The buyer is a company under the name Michael Thompson. But on paper, the seller is still Ellen. David clenched his fists. He used a legal entity to hide the sale, trying to make it look legitimate. But what's more concerning, Camille looked at him, hesitating. The account that received the money isn't in your mother's name. David froze. Then where did the money go? Camille pointed to a bank statement. An offshore account, opened at a bank in Panama. No real name attached. But the guarantor listed is Sean Morgan. David went stiff. My cousin? Camille nodded. Maybe he was coerced into signing. Or bought off. David took a deep breath. A bitter, metallic taste rose to his throat like rust. They're bleeding my mother dry, and blaming everything on me. Camille gently touched his shoulder. Do you want to report them? David shook his head. Not yet. I want them to fall on their own. I just need to keep collecting more. In the following weeks, Michael spiraled out of control. Creditors called non-stop, banks sent warning letters, and his lawyer refused to represent him due to unpaid fees. He started drinking more, snapping at delivery people and neighbors alike. One time at the supermarket, his credit card was declined. The cashier, a woman named Laura, frowned. Mr. Thompson, your card's been frozen. Do you have another? Michael's face turned red as he rummaged through his wallet. Ellen stood beside him, panicked. What do we do now? Shut up. Michael growled, abandoning the cart and dragging Ellen away. But the humiliation didn't stop there. One day, the electric company cut the power due to 3 months of unpaid bills. The house was freezing, the fridge stopped working, the heater stayed silent. A week later, the water company came and removed the meter. They had to beg for water from a neighbor. Marissa, the downstairs neighbor, sighed. I told you. That house was burning money. Little David was the only decent one. Someone else chimed in, David. Ever since he left, that place feels haunted. Ellen sat in the kitchen, holding an old photo of the 3 of them, her, Charles, and 6-year-old David. Her eyes welled up. Right then, a loud knock came at the door. Michael opened it to find 2 men in suits holding folders. We're here to reappraise the property. As requested by the bank. Michael shouted, you have no right to come in here. The older man, who introduced himself as Albert, replied, Citibank has obtained a court order. If the outstanding balance isn't paid within 20 days, this house will be seized. Michael collapsed onto a chair, laughing like a madman. At the same time, at the restaurant, Rose called David into her office. David, I know you've worked hard. But I've heard some rumors. What kind of rumors? David tensed. They say you were disowned by your family. That your mother rejected you. That you're involved in shady assets. Is that true? David fell silent. I won't deny it. But I've never stolen. Never lied. I was just left behind. Rose looked into his eyes, then placed a hand on his shoulder. I don't care about the past. I care that you keep your word. David bowed his head, eyes red. I won't disappoint you. That night, after finishing the last round of dishes, David sat in the storage room and opened his now thicker folder. He organized each page in sequence: assets, inheritance, identity fraud, unlawful transfers. He murmured, everything's falling apart, and they don't even know why yet. A pounding knock echoed at noon. Ellen opened the door to find Michael in shambles, wrinkled shirt, crooked tie, reeking of alcohol. Ellen, do you know what those bastards are saying about me? He shouted, stumbling inside. What now? Ellen asked nervously. They're calling me a fraud. Me. Michael Thompson, he slammed his hand on the table, knocking over a vase. Ellen backed away. Who said that? The bank? The bank, the lawyers, those scumbags on Wellington Avenue. They say the property doesn't belong to me. It's your fault, Ellen. You never transferred the title, never signed the deed. Now they treat me like a thief. Ellen was stunned. You're blaming this on me? You're the one who spent like crazy. You're the one who sold property behind my back. Michael sneered. And who let that bastard son exist in the first place? You. Ellen turned pale. Yes. If it weren't for David, things would be different. He's the lingering shadow of that Charles. Since he came back, this house hasn't known peace. I tolerated him, I put up with him, and you always looked at him like he was your dead husband. Shut up. No. I won't shut up anymore. He's ungrateful. I fed him, gave him a roof, and when I needed him, he walked out. And now, he's sabotaging us. You don't know anything. Ellen screamed. David never took a penny from you. He worked part-time and hid money under his mattress just to buy you a Christmas gift. And you threw him out on the coldest night of the year because he couldn't pay the electric bill. Whose fault is that? His. Ellen, a soft voice came from the door. It was Marissa, the downstairs neighbor, holding a bag of bread. I heard everything. Ellen, do you really believe your son is the one ruining things? Ellen lowered her head, eyes tearing up. I don't know anymore. Everything's just collapsing. Marissa walked in and put a hand on her shoulder. I saw David sneaking your laundry out to wash it. I saw him bringing home bread and pretending you bought it for him. Your son never complained. Ellen broke into sobs. Michael scoffed. So now it's all my fault. Fine. Do whatever you want. If I end up on the street tomorrow, don't come crying to me. Ellen, Marissa gripped her arm. You need to wake up. He's destroying you. Get out of my house. Michael roared, shoving Marissa so hard she nearly fell. Stop it. Ellen shouted, her voice echoing with strength for the first time. I'm tired of cleaning up after your stupidity and cruelty. I lost my husband, I won't lose my son too. Michael stared at her. What did you say? You're still defending him? Yes. Because I'm his mother. Those words shattered the air in the room. Michael grabbed his coat, snarling, You'll regret this, Ellen. I'll show this whole city who you and your son really are. He slammed the door as he left. 2 days later, rumors spread across the neighborhood. David was a drug addict, had stolen money from his mother, and was kicked out for being dangerous. The first person to hear was Rose, the restaurant owner where David worked. She called him into the kitchen after his shift. David, I need you to be honest. Have you ever used drugs? David froze. Where did you hear that? People are talking. Someone came here, claimed to be your relative, and warned me. It was Michael, David muttered. Do you have any proof? Rose asked directly. If not, I may have to let you go. I can't have customers doubting our integrity. David sat still. Then, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a stack of documents. These are the assets my father left behind. Here's the forged power of attorney, the offshore transfers. I've been collecting this for 2 months. Rose looked through the pages. She didn't say anything, just quietly set them down on the table. I don't understand all of it, but I know you're not lying. Please, don't fire me. Rose nodded. I'll keep you. But be careful. When the wicked are cornered, they bite whoever's closest. Just like Rose warned, the next day David was denied a room at a boarding house. Are you David Morgan? The landlord asked. Yes. Sorry. That room's been taken. Good luck. Behind the landlord, David saw Michael walking out of the hallway. He smirked and gave a mocking nod. The following day, 2 restaurants David had applied to turned him down. "You've got a theft record, don't you?" one manager asked. "No. Never. We don't hire people with shady backgrounds. Please leave." David walked away into the crowded street, feeling invisible. No one looked at him. No one wanted to know the truth. He went to the library and found Camille. "I need help." She looked at him, concerned. "What happened?" "They're destroying my reputation. I want to fight back." Camille nodded. "We'll plan something. But we need to be careful." "No," David said, clenching his fists. "No more hiding. I'm going to expose them in the light." He opened the folder and, for the first time, turned to the final page, a detailed report with full evidence and one line naming the recipient. To Office of Attorney Louis Anderson, Specialist in Finance and Family Law. Camille smiled, seeing something in his eyes for the first time, not pain, but determination. The name David Morgan was becoming a chilling warning among landlords and employers in New York. At Dream Cafe, when a staff member suggested hiring David for dishwashing, the owner, Lisa Roberts, frowned. "David? Isn't he the one disowned by his mother for drug use? Mr. Michael came here recently, warned us he'd assaulted someone." "But I heard David's not like that," the young employee whispered. Lisa snapped, "In this industry, rumors matter more than resumes. If you don't want surprise inspections, stay away from people like him." Those words spread, like poisonous roots reaching across the city. No one had proof, but everyone quietly crossed out David's name the moment he appeared. At a low-income dormitory for workers, David stood at the front desk, handing over temporary ID documents Camille had helped him obtain. "I sent my file by email," David said softly. "I can pay 1 month in advance." The man behind the counter, Mr. Matthew, glanced over the documents, then shook his head. "Sorry, we're out of rooms. But the sign at the gate still says there are vacancies." Matthew stared at him for a few seconds, then handed the file back. "You're David Morgan, right?" David nodded, his heart starting to sink. "We don't accept people with a history of mental instability. That's management's decision." "History?" David was stunned. "I've never." Matthew spoke softly, gently but firmly. "Someone from St. Mary's Psychiatric Hospital contacted us. Their records say you were treated for panic attacks and had aggressive behavior toward your biological mother." David froze. He knew immediately Michael, or someone hired by him, had impersonated him and spread false information. "Can I speak to the manager?" David asked. "No one will see you. Please leave." He turned around and walked out of the building, step by step, feeling the stares of people around him piercing his back like sharp little needles. David started having trouble breathing. Not from the cold but from the invisible chokehold of the society surrounding him. People who used to be kind now avoided him. Rose still kept him on, but more than once, customers whispered behind his back. "Isn't that David Morgan? I heard his mom kicked him out in the middle of winter. They say he once pulled a knife on his family." Once, he was serving a large group of customers. As he brought out a tray, a woman in her 40s stared at him, then said loudly, "I know this one. He was detained for assault. Disgusting. Get us a different server." David stood still, tray still in hand. He looked at Rose, waiting for a word of defense. But Rose stayed silent. That night, she called him into the storage room. "I'm sorry. But from now on, you'll stay in the kitchen. No more front of house." David lowered his head. "I understand." One night, as he returned to the parking garage, David found a piece of paper tucked onto his backpack. "Get out of New York if you have any self-respect. Just die already. No name. No signature. But the boot print on the paper, the smell of cheap cigarettes, and the messy handwriting made it clear to David, Ethan's gang, the ones who had beaten him on Christmas Eve, were back. He looked around. Darkness wrapped the place. Raymond wasn't there. Wind howled through the rusty metal roofing. David's heart pounded. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He burned the note and tossed the ashes into the drain. His eyes were colder and harder than winter. One day, David was reading case files at the library when Camille came running in, face pale. "Something's happened," she said. "A local news site just published a story, David Morgan, from disowned son to a potential threat to the community." David took her phone, eyes fixed on the article, a picture of him taken secretly from behind the restaurant kitchen, paired with distorted quotes from anonymous relatives, accusing him of theft, rebellion, and psychological instability. Camille's hands trembled. "I think Michael paid some tabloids. But if this spreads, then I'll lose whatever chance I have left," David said, like he was used to it. "It's fine. Let them talk. David, you can't go through this alone forever." He looked up at Camille, voice firm, "I'm not that boy from Christmas Eve anymore." In the following days, David lived like a true ghost. He avoided crowds, avoided eye contact. But whenever he walked the sidewalk, whispers followed him. He worked quietly in the kitchen, saying nothing. When customers complained that the food was cold, Rose whispered, "I can't keep you here if there are more complaints." David nodded. "I know." That night, he left the restaurant with a bag of leftovers. He sat on the steps in front of the closed library, eating slowly. A group of teens walked by, giggling. "There he is, David Morgan. Writing a memoir now. Bet he's heading back to the psych ward soon." He didn't reply. Didn't get angry. He just stayed silent. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why does that man look so sad?" The mother pulled her child close, whispering, "Don't go near him. It's not safe." David watched them leave. He whispered to himself, "Even if I'm all alone, I won't fall." He gripped his backpack, his whole life inside it, and stood up. Under the dim yellow streetlights, his footsteps were steady, as if he were walking toward an abyss, or maybe toward a light only he could see. The next week passed in the dense cold of late New York winter, the kind that froze even people's breath in midair. David began to feel the cold not just on his skin, but deep in his soul, in every broken dream and restless night. One gray afternoon, he returned to an old cafe hoping to find a new job. Before entering, he took a deep breath, adjusted the frayed shoulder of his coat, and stepped up to the counter. "Hello, sir. I'm here to apply for a job. I have experience washing glasses, cleaning, and kitchen prep." The man behind the counter didn't even look up. "Name?" "David Morgan." The man froze, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You're that troublemaker from the restaurant on Broadway, aren't you?" "No. I never caused trouble." "Who are you trying to fool?" "Someone already came by and warned us. They showed us news articles and photos. They're fake. My stepfather made them up. Out. Now. I don't want trouble." David stood there for a moment, then nodded. "I understand." On his way back, wind slapped his face. He passed a bus stop where a group of school kids were laughing. One little girl looked at him and whispered to her mother, "Mommy, he looks like that bad man from the internet." The mother pulled her child in and gave David a glare as if he were a kidnapper. He turned away, gripping his backpack straps tightly. When he arrived at the familiar underground garage, he saw the entrance sealed. A red warning sign was taped across it, "Restricted area, hazard, city eviction order." "Raymond," David called softly. No answer. He stood before the metal door, trying to peer through the dark gap. A security guard emerged from around the corner. "What are you doing here?" I live here. I used to. No unauthorized access. Get lost. Please, I just need to get my things. An old friend of mine lives inside. No one lives there anymore. A crew came yesterday and cleared it out. The old man was taken away. No idea where to. It's city property now. David stood frozen. I don't have anywhere to sleep. Not my problem, the guard said coldly and walked away. David sat down on the steps across the street, head resting on his knees. The purple scarf was long gone. His shoes, heels torn, were soaked. He didn't cry anymore. There were no tears left. The next day, Camille came to the restaurant and asked for David outside. Her eyes were full of worry. I just got word. Michael sent a letter to attorney Louis Anderson's office, the one we were going to contact. What did he send? A letter accusing David Morgan of fraud, falsifying records, making up stories to extort his mother and stepfather. He included a statement signed by Ellen. That's impossible. David jumped up. My mother would never. Camille placed a hand on his shoulder. The signature is real. I checked it. But she might have been pressured to sign it. David stepped back. So, my mother chose to side with him. Camille said nothing. He's not satisfied ruining me. Now he wants her to curse me with her own signature. What are you going to do? David looked into the distance. Nothing. It's time they destroy themselves. That evening, David returned to Central Park, the place where he once hid from the Christmas snow. The big Christmas tree was gone, replaced by a cold gravel field. He sat on the familiar stone bench, eyes empty. A voice came from behind. David? He turned around. It was Mrs. Marissa. Her old face, lined with wrinkles, looked even paler in the cold. I heard. Michael's accusing you. I know. Are you okay? I think. I have nothing left to lose. That's not true. Mrs. Marissa sat beside him and pulled a small notebook from her bag. This is Ellen's journal. I found it by accident. She left it at my place the last time she visited. David opened it. Every page was his mother's neat handwriting. One passage made his heart ache. I don't deserve to be a mother. David never did anything wrong. But I let Michael control everything, even my heart. I was afraid. Afraid of being abandoned again. And so, I abandoned my own son. David clutched the notebook to his chest. She never stopped loving you, Marissa said. She was just too weak. David shook his head. I'm not waiting for her anymore. All I have is myself. Marissa smiled. Then stand up. You've survived too much to die in silence. The next morning, David knocked on the door of Louis Anderson's law office. A young secretary came out. Can I help you? My name is David Morgan. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Anderson. Please wait a moment. 10 minutes later, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a neat suit stepped out. I'm Louis. Are you the one Michael Thompson is accusing? Yes. But I bring the truth. David opened his backpack and placed a stack of documents on the table: papers, receipts, transaction records. Camille stood silently behind him, offering quiet support. Louis read them, his eyes sharpening. This is solid evidence. What do you want? No money, no revenge. I just want them to stop destroying me. Louis nodded. I'll file a petition to the preliminary court. And I'll speak to Michael myself. David stood up and bowed slightly. Thank you, sir. Louis looked at him, his eyes softening. You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep living, truly living. That night, David returned to a familiar spot, this time, the overhang in front of an old library closed for renovations. He pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket and scribbled. I'm not the child who was abandoned by his mother. I am David Morgan, the one who will stand tall even if the world forgets me. He folded the paper and tucked it into the last hidden compartment of his backpack, the one that once held the purple scarf. Under the dim streetlight, David sat there, eyes not glowing with hope, but with determination. The early spring light filtered faintly through the old library's roof tiles. David had spent the night there, asleep in the cold wind. But the next morning, he woke up with an unusual strength, not quiet endurance, but fierce resolve. Camille arrived with a cup of warm milk and a small bag of bread. You slept here? There's nowhere else, David replied softly. Camille sat beside him and handed him an envelope. Good news. David opened it. A sheet bearing the seal of the United States, with a bold title, Full Scholarship Confirmation, New York University. He read each line with trembling hands. Mr. Louis Anderson wrote a recommendation letter for you. And they've granted you a special scholarship for students with exceptional self-study achievements and disadvantaged backgrounds. But I haven't graduated from high school. There's a new provision. You can be considered with a strong letter of recommendation and by passing a placement exam. You just need to pass the test next week. I've printed all the materials you'll need. David was overcome. Why are you helping me so much? Camille smiled. Because you didn't give up. And because you reminded me that good people don't always win, but if they persevere, they'll make goodness win. From that day on, David spent all his time at the library. He studied furiously math, grammar, history, literature, and English. Everything he thought had been stolen from his childhood, he took back piece by piece. One day, while buried in his books, Camille came over. Someone wants to meet you. David looked up. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a gray suit walked in. Hello, David. I'm Ernest Bennett, professor at the law faculty of Fordham University. You came here, for me? Ernest smiled. Louis Anderson told me a lot about you. A 17-year-old boy, homeless, self-taught in law, gathering evidence and defending himself without legal counsel. That's rare. I wanted to see for myself who you are. David stood up, his voice hoarse but steady. I'm not the best. But I will never stop learning. Because if knowledge is power, then I need it to survive. Ernest nodded. We don't need a genius. We need someone who knows why they're learning. The placement test took place in an auxiliary testing room. David sat among other candidates, all older than him. He gripped his pen and took a deep breath. When the proctor gave the signal, he began to write as if every word was a weapon. 4 hours later, David exited the room. The sun shone brighter than usual, or perhaps he had started seeing the world through new eyes. 3 days later, Ernest personally called. Congratulations, David. You didn't just meet the requirements, you scored the highest on the legal essay. David collapsed onto a bench, hands shaking. A tear fell, but this time not from pain. For the first time in a long while, he felt worthy of the light ahead. Camille gave David a new backpack. No more that torn one. This is what you carry into school and your future. David hugged it, hesitating. Will you stay at the library? No. I've been hired at the New York County Court. But don't worry, we'll see each other plenty. They touched hands, a promise without words. David entered college as a completely new person. A suit bought by Rose, an old laptop donated by Camille, and in his coat pocket, he still kept the paper that read, I am David Morgan, the one who will stand tall. In class, there were skeptical looks at first. But when David answered the professor's question sharply, those looks turned into respect. A fellow student leaned over. Which school were you at before this? School of Life, David smiled. Outside of class, David worked part-time at a small cafe near campus. This time, no one turned him away. The owner, Valerie, an elderly woman with silver hair, always called him son. You're studying law. I once dreamed of being a lawyer too, but had to quit to raise my 9 siblings. You're the first person to call me son without scorn, David said. Valerie laughed. Because you deserve it. At night, David studied, worked, and saved every penny. He spent only on books and essentials. In his tiny, worn-out rental room, he taped to the wall the only remaining photo of him as a child with his mother and birth father. Mom. I'll start over. Not for you to accept me but so I can see myself as worthy. One morning, as he was washing glasses at the cafe, a voice called from the door. David? He turned. It was Sean, his cousin, the one who had sent him a warning letter. Sean. I heard you got into college. Congratulations. David looked at him, cautious. Sean sighed. I'm sorry. Back then. Michael threatened to sue the whole family if I didn't sign the false report. David stayed silent. I want to make things right. If you need a witness, I'll testify. David looked him in the eye. No need. They'll collapse on their own. I just want to live in peace. Sean bowed his head. You're just like Charles. Honest, but never cruel. The first month passed. David scored the highest in his intro to law class. Professor Ernest appointed him as a teaching assistant for a group of first-year students, and the school began to notice him as a standout case. One afternoon, Ernest called him to his office. David, I have a proposal. Yes. We're planning to expand the Homeless Youth Access to Education program. I want you to be its face. David was stunned. Me? But I'm just a freshman. All the better. You're living proof, no path is too narrow if the heart is wide enough. David said quietly, if it helps others like I used to be, then I agree. That night, David walked through Central Park where he once curled up in the snow. Now, on that same bench, a boy was hugging a plastic bag. David approached and sat beside him. Are you hungry? The boy nodded. David handed him his remaining bread and milk. Who are you? The boy asked. Someone who used to sit exactly where you are. The boy's eyes widened. And who are you now? David looked up at the sky and smiled. Someone rebuilding his life, one brick at a time. 3 years later, the name David Morgan was no longer tied to vicious rumors. It appeared regularly in articles about New York's outstanding students. David stepped out of his law school graduation ceremony, diploma with honors in one hand, a special award for contributions to underprivileged students in the other. Ernest, the professor who had mentored him, gave his shoulder a firm squeeze. You're officially a lawyer now. And more than that, a symbol. David smiled and shook his hand. In the crowd, Camille cried. She stepped forward and hugged David tightly. You did it, after everything. David whispered, thanks to you and even thanks to those who turned their backs on me. Without them, I wouldn't have known how strong I was. He turned to Valerie, the cafe owner who had since passed the shop to her daughter to retire. I did it. Valerie smiled. You don't need someone to birth you to be theirs. You're the family I chose with my heart. A month later, David signed the ownership papers for the old house on Maple Street, the place he was once thrown out of on Christmas at 17. The broker asked, You're sure? This house has a messy financial past. David nodded. Exactly why I'll turn it into a place for healing. No more bad memories, only hope. He didn't buy the house for revenge. He bought it to create a support center for homeless teens, naming it New Light. Camille became co-director. Ernest handled legal affairs. Valerie sponsored the first meal. And the first kids David welcomed were just like he had once been, children of the streets, now given a chance. One afternoon, while David was guiding a group of teens on how to write job applications, the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a middle-aged woman, her face gaunt, hair disheveled, holding a worn fabric bag. It was Ellen. "Mom." She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Son." They stood there silently for a moment, neither knowing how to begin. Ellen trembled. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted to see you once. To see that you're doing well." David remained silent. A light breeze passed, carrying old memories: the snowy night, the red gift box, her cold stare, and the slamming door. "I know it was all my fault," Ellen said, choking up. "I let him deceive me. I signed that statement accusing you because I was forced to. I was a coward." David asked softly, "Where are you living now?" "Nowhere anymore. Michael left me. After he was investigated for money laundering, he fled to Portugal. He's now wanted by the police. The money is gone. I lost everything." "Everything?" Ellen nodded. "But it's fair. If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have woken up." David looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to a staff member and said, "Get her a hot meal. A bed. And a chance." Ellen broke down, clutching her son. "I'm sorry. David." David spoke gently, "You left me on a freezing night. Today I choose to welcome you with compassion. Not because you're my mother, but because I want to end all hatred here and now." News about the new Light Center spread. Dozens of volunteer organizations came to help. Television crews interviewed David, calling him the young man who turned darkness into hope. One day, while giving free legal advice to a boy who had been abused, David received a call from the police. "Hello, Attorney Morgan. We've just apprehended Michael Thompson in Lisbon. We need your assistance as a witness for extradition." David stared at the screen. A faint smile appeared. "Thank you. But I don't need to see him again. I've already closed that chapter of my life." "Are you sure?" "The media is demanding interviews." "That doesn't matter anymore. The world may want to record my story, but I only need to see the kids here eat, sleep in warmth, and believe that tomorrow is worth living for." That Christmas Eve, David stood in the backyard of the center, where a Christmas tree shimmered with lights. Children ran around, holding sweets and singing innocent songs. A small boy named James tugged on David's sleeve. "David, why do you help us?" David knelt down to meet his gaze, looking into James's wide eyes. "Because I used to be you. Because once, I sat alone in the snow, and no one asked if I was hungry. And because I survived. I have to help others keep going." James hugged him tightly. "You're the real Santa Claus." David laughed. "No, I'm just someone with a heart that refused to freeze." Camille came out with a new sign, featuring a large quote: white letters on a blue background. "Family isn't where we're born. It's what we build with kindness." Valerie cried. "You're the child every mother dreams of. Even if I didn't give birth to you, I'm proud to be a part of your life." Ellen stood at the far end of the yard, too afraid to enter the circle. But David had seen her, and he nodded gently. She walked forward, holding a small gift box. "I didn't know what to give, but I reknitted the old scarf. Lavender purple. I remember you gave it to me, but I never wore it." David opened the box. The scarf was smooth, every stitch carefully done. He wrapped it around his neck and smiled. "Everyone can start over, Mom. If they dare to face the past and choose to be kind from this moment on." Ellen nodded, eyes glistening. "You're the best person I've ever known, and the one I lost." When the clock struck midnight, snow began to fall gently. Not cold, but like warm pieces of paper floating down. David stood in the center yard, surrounded by children holding candles, singing in chorus. "Silent night, holy night." A spotlight lit up the corner of the center, where a small bronze plaque stood. "New Light Center, where every child has the right to hope. On the wall was an image of David holding a child's hand, both gazing toward the horizon. Camille whispered, "You've become a light for so many." David replied simply, "I'm just one small light. But in the dark, even one is enough to guide the way." David's story teaches us that resilience and compassion can turn pain into strength. Even after betrayal, rejection, and defamation, he chose not hate, but knowledge and kindness to rebuild his life. When the world turned its back, David kept walking forward, and that's what made him victorious. The lesson is this: the past may break us, but how we rise defines who we are. Forgiveness isn't always because others deserve it, but because we need peace.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.